guys, it's Kathleen, and today I'm doing a discussion video on a topic that might actually be a bit sensitive. I'm not 100% sure, but basically I'm going to be talking about the presence of religion in books, specifically in YA. I wanted to make this video mainly because I noticed, for the most part, there is a lack of religion in YA. And I'm not talking about preaching, I'm mainly talking about religious characters. I find that that's something that YA is almost always devoid of, and if they talk about it, it's usually a side character. So I was interested in discussing what the reasons were behind that and why it is and what my personal feelings are on that. So I will get this out of the way right off the bat, is that I want to see more religious characters in YA, not necessarily the religion I'm a part of. I'm a Christian, but I don't necessarily need to see every character be a Christian or anything like that, but I definitely do think we need to see more of it, especially of religious minorities. I think that's really important. I wanted to get that out of the way because I'm not really an unbiased perspective on this. I do have an opinion, I do have thoughts about it. I formed my opinion after a long while of reading, and I really do believe in it very strongly, so I wanted to make that clear, but I also want to make it clear that just because I personally want to see more of this in books doesn't mean that you're bad if you don't, or that I would judge you for that opinion. So the first thing I really want to cover is just whether there really is a lack of religious characters in young adult books. Personally, through all my reading, I have found that there is. So first of all, there are only about 3 books I could think of off the top of my head where the main character was a religious character. The first one is Saints and Misfits by S.K. Ali, which I read this year and I really loved, and that featured a Muslim main character. The second one is Does My Head Look Big in This by Randa Abdel Fattah. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, please forgive me and correct me. And the third one is The Names They Gave Us by Emery Ward. I have only read one of these 3 books. I haven't read Does My Head Look Big in This, and I haven't read The Names They Gave Us, although both of them have been my TBR for a long time, and I think years ago I picked up Does My Head Look Big in This and I just put it back down for whatever reason. Of those 2 books, 2 of them feature a Muslim main character, and then the third one I believe features a Christian main character. Almost every other YA book I've read that has a religious character has the character as a side character or a best friend, something like that, never the main character. I think having a religious character is kind of like being a vegetarian in a book. You want to include it because you don't want to seem like you're not including it, but at the same time you don't want to seem preachy to your audience, so you kind of push it to the side and make it a part of someone else's life, but you don't emphasize it in the main characters so as not to preach too much to your audience. And honestly, I totally get why authors don't want to include religious characters. I myself have really struggled with this in my own writing. For example, I think it's really authentic to include religious characters, but at the same time, you don't want to offend people, you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, you don't want to make someone feel like you're preaching to them necessarily. You really have to do it in such a way that you incorporate it into this character's life and make it clear it's important, but you don't want to make it seem like you're pushing it on the audience. But at the same time, I think we can lose something really valuable. So as far as books that feature religious side characters, we have the character in the book First by Laurie Elizabeth Flynn, and this book has a main character who is completely not religious, but her best friend is quite religious, and it's actually treated very well. I think it's very well respected. She's a devout evangelical Christian, and the totally different perspectives are totally understood and really regarded well, so I liked that about this book. And then the second one I was thinking of, which I don't have on my shelf right now, I'm not sure where it is, but that's Highly Illogical Behavior by John Corey Whaley. That has a main character who has a religious best friend, but her religion isn't taken completely seriously, in my opinion at least. She's taken a bit like she's a bit of a wingnut, she's a little bit weird, and so that's how her religion is regarded as well. And while some people may feel, oh, I wouldn't really have a problem with this happening in YA, I'd like to see more of it, I do want to point out that I think there are some people who are very uncomfortable with it. Author Shannon Hale talked about on Twitter recently about how she was writing a book that featured a child who prays and talks about Jesus, and she felt like she wanted to include those elements because they were very fundamental parts of her growing up, because I believe Shannon Hale is Mormon, member of the Church of Latter-day Saints. And several people told her that they were uncomfortable with it, they weren't okay with that, even though it was only just a small reference, it wasn't a big part of the book. Even though it seems simple to just say, oh yeah, let's include more religious characters, it's really not, because there's so many sensitive issues. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with religion, maybe it's hurt them, maybe they just don't want it pushed on them, and so they veer away from that, and people perceive this as something that doesn't sell, so we don't produce any kinds of books like that. And I don't just think it's harmful to maybe Christian readers who want to read about Christians, I think it's harmful to anybody from any religion. I think if we say, no, we don't want any religion in young adult books, then we push away religious minorities, and that's really unfortunate. If you follow my channel, you know I love Saints and Misfits, and that was just such a fundamental book for me. It was such an awe-inspiring book, because it was just amazing to see not only a religious main character, but a Muslim main character. I felt like I'd never seen that much in a book before. I hadn't really read about Muslim teens, and I hadn't really ever read about any teens who, for them, faith was an active part of their life that they really needed to incorporate. And so for me, it was actually a big deal to see a main character who made choices about her faith and for whom faith was an integral part of her life, because that was always my experience. And I think if we say, no, we're not going to include religion in YA at all, we oftentimes miss out on representing someone's experience. And I don't think it has to do with a specific religion necessarily. As you can tell, I loved Saints and Misfits, and I'm not Muslim, and I really connected to the main character in spite of that, just because she went through similar experiences that I went through. The other issue in regards to not including religion in young adult books is I think we really miss out on a certain cultural perspective that we wouldn't otherwise get. So for example, if you want to learn about Muslim culture, reading a book like that is such a great way to do it, especially when you're a young teenager. You really get a sense of it, especially when it's written by an author who has grown up in that culture and that religion and has lived that life. It gives you such a sense of what it's like to be a religious minority in America, especially in this time period, and that kind of voice is so important. And I don't know tons about the Hindu religion, but I thought it was so cool when in Dimple Met Rishi, the main characters were both Hindu, and they talked about it, and it actually was a part of Rishi's life, a little bit more than Dimple's, but he actually did emphasize it, and it was important to him, and that was really cool. And I learned about that culture through the religion, and that was super interesting. I think extremely religious teenagers are probably a minority. A lot of devout religious people, not devout Christians, I'm not saying Christians are a minority by any means, but devout religious teenagers tend to be a minority, and so I think we kind of look at that and we say, we don't really need that, we don't really want it, it's not going to sell, it's only selling to a very select group of people, and that's really too bad. I think teens can learn so much from learning about different faiths and learning about the religious lives of people, and I think that's very important. And I also think it's super important for teenagers who are religious to see themselves in books. Even if maybe it's not going to be the next best-selling novel, I think it does matter. More than that, I think we need to see more than just religious characters. I think we need to see a discussion of religion in general. For example, there's a book that came out pretty recently, or no, it comes out in January. It's called Nice Try Jane Sinner by Leanne Oak, and the reason I mention it is because I saw Emma Book's review of it, and she talked a bit about this in her wrap-up, I think, and she talked about how it's a character who leaves the church and she has that experience, and that was something that she'd never seen before in a book, and it was something she really related to. And I think if we shy away from religion altogether and we just leave it as a no-go zone, then we don't tell those kinds of stories either about people who maybe lost their faith and maybe don't want to go back to it. I think we miss out on a lot when we do that. I feel like we've reached this point in YA where we believe that religion is okay if it's maybe a side character, or if the main character is just kind of neutral. They can't be devoutly religious, but they also can't be a devout atheist, because that will probably offend people too. We really are trying to toe an almost impossible line. Ultimately, people feel like they're not really represented on either side of the line. And it makes me really sad when people say, oh, I can't find myself in the book because this element isn't there. Now, I am not advocating by any means for every book having a religious main character and dealing with deep exploration of culture. I would also really like to see more own voices stories from religious people. So for example, more Muslim writers writing about Muslim stories, more Hindu writers writing about Hindu stories, that kind of thing. Definitely more of that, because I think it's really important that we don't just take these stories and say, oh yeah, I can tell them just as well as this person, I'm gonna do it. Because really, you can't. In the end, I feel like we need to find a way in which we can write books occasionally that do have religious main characters, so we know those books are out there and they exist, but we don't need to write them in such a way that they're being preachy and they're being direct to the audience, making you feel like you're bad. But in the end, I do want to see books where we don't necessarily shy away from the topic, where we're willing to talk about religion, we're willing to talk about how faith affects life, we're willing to talk about leaving religion, we're willing to really have those discussions, because I think those discussions are a fundamental part of people's lives. I think there's so many important stories to tell in connection to religion, and we're a little bit scared to tell them. Now, I totally understand why we don't want to tell them. A lot of people have been hurt by religion and don't really want books that are full of it, and I completely understand that. But I also believe that by not talking about it at all, then we really shy away from depicting something that really does matter for a lot of people. And we shy away from telling stories that are really important to different groups of people. Not talking about religion at all really does deny a fundamental part of what so many people are. I think having characters connected to religion in some way, whether they're against religion, whether they're for religion, whatever, I think that's important. I think it matters, and I really want to see more of that. I would love to hear what you guys have to say on this topic. I know this is kind of a sensitive subject for some people, so if you don't like this and you think this video is garbage, please let me know. I would like to know if you are bothered by this. I would really like to know as well. I just want to hear your opinions on this topic. Is it something you'd like to see more of? Is it something you actually think we have too much of? Is it something you think we should just stay away from altogether? It's not really YA's place to do it. Please let me know. I would love to hear this in the discussion. I think this is an interesting subject regardless of whether you are religious or whether you're an atheist, whatever you are. I think there's something for everybody. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It was kind of a mess, but I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on your way out if you're new here. I upload videos every Tuesday and Friday with occasional bonus uploads throughout the week, usually when I'm not in school. If you'd like to follow me on any of my social medias, the links will all be in the description. But in the meantime, I will see you guys next time.